Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Even If Project podcast. Oh, my nails look terrible on this camera. I really need to get them redone again, but I just haven't had time. Anyways, I'm Christina. I'm so excited you guys are here with me today. Um, I'm struggling for words, and this has just started, so this is gonna go great today. I got my Bible open. I've got my coffee nearby, like always. And today we are going to be jumping into John chapter 9, which out of all of the passages or all the chapters that we've done in the virtual study and on this podcast, I think this has probably been one of my favorite ones that I've dug into. And I'm pretty excited to go over it with you guys today. I love it. I think it's going to be one of my favorites forever. So I'm excited about it. But in my notes, I wrote it down as John 9, 1 through 41, which I don't know why. It's strange because the entire chapter of John is 1 through 41. So I don't know why I did that, but there's something about this story where the longer that you actually sit with it, the more you understand, the clearer that it gets. Like if you just sit and skim it, you're not really going to understand what it's trying to teach you and you'll kind of miss the meaning of it. But actually, let's pause for a second because I have a story for you guys. I don't know why this just came into my mind. I guess it's a squirrel moment. Um, but if you listen to my last episode, this episode is going to be all over you if you can't already tell. If you listen to my last episode, we were talking about New Year. Oh, I can't talk too. This is wild. We were talking about New Year's resolutions and about how I really don't do them. Um, I feel like I still mostly stand by that, and I usually try them probably because I get FOMO, but I usually get really ambitious for about a week, and then I totally forget what my goal was or what my resolution was, or I just can't come up with one that's good enough before January 1st, so I kinda just give up, which is kinda silly. But if you're somebody that loves them, there's nothing wrong with that. I've just kind of learned that I tend to do better when I respond to what God is putting on my heart or what He's pushing me towards or something that I'm feeling drawn towards throughout the year versus just being put on the spot on January 1st. So I tend to just try to stay away from making these big promises to myself right away and putting this pressure on myself. But funny story, I was at CrossFit the other day and we were doing this workout that was like 26 rounds of just absolute chaos. If you're my coach and you're listening to this, I'm totally kidding. It was totally fun. I loved every second of it. But it was like heavy breathing, sweat everywhere, checking the clock every 2 seconds, questioning life choices, the whole drill. Well, before the actual workout, one of the guys was asking me if I've come up with a New Year's resolution yet. And I explained to him kind of the same thing that I just told you earlier, and like I did in the other episode, that I don't really do New Year's resolutions, and I just try to make goals for myself where I feel the nudges from God that comes up throughout the year. And he goes, "Yeah, that makes sense. I think mine is going to try to be on my phone less." And I don't know why, but that comment just kind of stuck with me for a little bit. Like even in the middle of these 26 rounds, when my brain should have been completely empty, I just kept thinking about this comment that he said. And it almost felt like a random thought, or less like a random thought, and more like a nudge that I was describing earlier to you. Like God was telling me something, and I was like, okay, God, I hear you. So I'm kind of eating my own words right now from my last episode about not doing them because I'm going to try one this year and I'm pretty excited about it. My goal is I'm going to try to be on my phone less. I feel like there's a reason why he told me what his resolution was. Um, and not in a dramatic delete everything, disappear off the grid way, just more intentional. So my goal will be to not check my phone for at least the first 2 hours of the day. Unless it has to do with the CrossFit stuff since I go right after waking up and I do my check-ins and all that stuff on my phone, but no scrolling, no social media, no, just completely being present in the day. And then the same thing for the last 2 hours before bed, especially because I've been trying to read more and I feel like I get more time, especially with a toddler and with this podcast and with school and being a wife and house stuff and everything else. I feel like I get the most time to read at night and I love reading, but if you guys have any book recommendations, please recommend them to me because I would love to hear them. I love any recommendation for them. I'm in a book club out here right now, and I'm really excited about it because we've been reading some pretty good books. But I'm such a slow reader that the best time I get is at night before bed. So when I'm sitting there scrolling on my phone, before I know it, I'm starting to fall asleep and I didn't read anything, and that kind of bums me out a little bit. So I'm rambling right now, but I've decided to do that before bed and then when I wake up in the morning. And that's it. That's the whole goal. Just trying to stay off my phone, being on my phone less, trying to stay off of it the first 2 hours after waking up and before going to bed. And I guess I'm telling you guys this because I'm excited that I'm making a New Year's resolution. I said in the last one that I don't do those. So I'm kind of excited that I'm changing what I said and kind of eating my own words on this. And also, if anyone wants to join me, because I feel like just being on our phones less just benefits everyone, I would genuinely love that. So I think I'm going to leave a poll on this episode. And if anyone says yes, I will happily be your accountability buddy. And if nobody responds, that's totally okay too. No pressure. Just thought I would put it out there just because I think it would be fun. But if you guys have a different resolution this year, I would love to hear it. Just leave it in the comments below because just like this guy did for me at the gym, it just takes one person to read that comment and just feel a push towards it. So anyways, I kind of went on a tangent there in the intro. I'm so sorry. I feel like this is going to be a long episode just with that. But let's actually get into the study now. Before we dive into John chapter 9, I want to do a quick little recap like we usually do before we jump into the story cold because you might miss why it's such a big deal. So, we're in Jerusalem still. We're still in the aftermath of the Feast of Tabernacles, which is the big fall festival where the whole city would have been packed and Jesus has been teaching publicly. And honestly, the tension has already been building for a while now. In John 7 and 8, Jesus keeps saying things that sound normal to us now, like, I'm the light of the world, and if you knew the Father, you would know me. But in that moment, those were not just nice inspirational quotes. They were fighting words to the religious leaders. Because Jesus isn't just teaching, he's claiming identity. He's basically saying, I'm not just sent by God, I am from God. And at the end of John 8, it got intense. Jesus says, before Abraham was I am, which is basically him using the name God used for himself. And the crowd tries to stone him. So the air is already charged. It's not calm. It's not neutral. People are watching him, judging him, testing him, and looking for any reason they can to just take him down. And that's the setting we're walking into where John 9 begins. Jesus is leaving that moment, and as he's walking, he's passing a man who has been blind from birth. And what happens next is not just a healing story. It turns into this whole public collision between mercy and religion, between a man who can finally see and people who are determined not to. So as we read, just keep that in the back of your mind, that this isn't happening in some quiet little side street. This is happening in a city where Jesus is already being watched, and everything he does is being treated like evidence. Okay, let's read it. So we are going to be starting today. First, I should say that I am reading from my CSB Bible. If you have a different version, that's okay. It may sound a little bit different, but the meaning is always still going to be the same. We are going to be starting with verses 1 through 5. And it says, as he was passing by, he saw a man blind from birth. His disciples asked him, Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind? Neither this man nor his parents sinned, Jesus answered. This came about so that God's works might be displayed in him. We must do the works of him who sent me while it is day. Night is coming when no one can work. As long as I am in the world, I am the light of the world. Okay, so we're introduced to this man that was born blind. It didn't happen later. It wasn't from an accident. It was from birth. And the disciples are asking one honest question that kind of feels really human. They basically say, okay, so who messed up? Who caused this? And I know that can feel harsh, but let's be real for a second. People still think like this today. We might not say it out loud, but we think it. Like, if someone is suffering, we want a reason. We want a cause. We want a formula. Because if suffering has a neat explanation, it feels safer. It makes us feel safer. If suffering is always someone's fault, then we can believe we can avoid it by just doing the right things. But Jesus does not play that game here. He says, neither. This isn't a punishment story. And I need you to hear what Jesus is doing here, because he isn't calling suffering good. He's not saying that blindness is fun or that he's romanticizing pain. He's saying that this is not about blame. And that is a huge shift, because shame loves to attach itself to suffering. So let's step into our first reflection question, and I want you to sit with this one for a second. If you're new to these episodes, like always, I'm going to put the reflection questions down in the show notes, so don't worry about trying to write them down super fast. But for the first question, it is, where have you been trying to find someone to blame when Jesus is trying to invite you to trust him instead? Not to deny what hurt, not to pretend it is fine, but to stop turning your story into a courtroom. Because some of us are exhausted from being both the judge and the defendant in our own life. Now, Jesus says something really important in verses 4 and 5 about the works of him who sent me, and I am the light of the world. Now, remember in John, light is not just a vibe. Light is revelation, light is truth, light is Jesus making God visible. So the setup here is basically this. Here's what light does. Light reveals, light heals, light confronts, and light makes things clearer. And I remember the first time that I read this part that's kind of mixed into this verse that we just talked about. It's when Jesus says, the night is coming when no one can work. And I was like, wait, what does that even mean? That sounds kind of intense or weird, right? But he's not being ominous. He's not talking about the end of the world. He's talking about time. Jesus knows his time here looks a certain way. He knows he won't be walking around healing people openly and teaching face to face like he is currently. He knows opposition is growing, and he knows things are moving him towards the cross. And instead of making him pull back, it actually does the opposite. It makes him lean in. When he says night is coming, it's almost like he's saying, I'm not going to waste this moment. I'm not going to wait for a safer time. I'm not going to hold off on compassion. I'm not going to delay doing good just because it's going to cost me something. He heals now. And that matters because this miracle isn't impulsive. It's intentional. Jesus knows exactly what this kind of healing is going to stir up, and he chooses it anyway. So let's move on. Let's read verses 6 through 12. After he said these things, he spit on the ground, made some mud from the saliva, and spread the mud on his eyes. Go, he told him, wash in the pool of Siloam, which means sent. So he left, washed, and came back seeing. His neighbors and those who had seen him before as a beggar said, isn't this the one who used to sit begging? Some said, he's the one. Others were saying, no, but he looks like him. He kept saying, I'm the one. So they asked him, then how were your eyes opened? He answered, the man called Jesus made mud, spread it on my eyes, and told me, go to Siloam and wash. So when I went and washed, I received my sight. Where is he? They asked. I don't know, he said. Okay. Jesus spits on the ground, makes mud, puts it in this man's eyes, and tells him to go wash in the pool of Siloam. And I know this is one of those moments where you're like, what the heck just happened? Why did he just do that? Because Jesus could have just spoken a word. He's done that before, right? So why mud? Why spit? Why go wash? And a couple thoughts for this one. First, Jesus is not just healing the man. He is also poking at the religious system that had turned faith into a performance. Because making mud was considered work by some religious leader. And you know what day it is? It's the Sabbath. So Jesus is not only healing, he is challenging their version of holiness. Second, notice the man has to participate. He has to go. He has to wash. This is not earn your miracle. It is respond to Jesus. He is being invited into trust. And third, this healing is public. The man is going to walk away from Jesus with mud on his face and make his way to a pool, which means other people are going to see him. And sometimes the process God uses in your life is not private, it is visible. Not because he wants to embarrass you by any means, because he wants to make it clear that what happens next is him. So for our next reflection question, is there an area of your life where Jesus is asking you to obey before you fully understand? Like you don't have the whole picture, but you have a next step. Now, in the next part of this passage, the neighbors see him. They are genuinely confused. I mean, who wouldn't be? Because you see this guy with mud on his face and spit in his eyes. I don't know. But they're like, wait, is that him? Is that the same guy? And he's like, yeah, it's me. And then, of course, they ask the question everyone once answered, but how? And his response is so simple. He just says, the man called Jesus. And that matters because this is the very beginning of his understanding. He doesn't have language yet. He doesn't have theology. He doesn't have a speech prepared. All he has is honesty. Right now, Jesus is just the man called Jesus to him. And that's okay. That's exactly where he is. And that's kind of where some of us are at right now too, which is totally fine in our faith. But now let's see how this conversation continues or what happens after the conversation. Let's go and read verses 13 through 17. They brought the man who used to be blind to the Pharisees. The day that Jesus made the mud and opened his eyes was a Sabbath. Then the Pharisees asked him again how he received his sight. He put mud on my eyes, he told them. I washed and I can see. Some of the Pharisees said, this man is not from God because he doesn't keep the Sabbath. But others were saying, how can a sinful man perform such signs? And there was a division among them. Again, they asked the blind man, what do you say about him since he opened your eyes? He is a prophet, he said. Okay, so the religious leaders show up and notice what they focus on. Not the miracle, not the restored life, not the mercy, the method, the timing, the rule, the Sabbath. Remember back in, I put a tab here for it, in John 5, and I believe it started around verse 5, but it's basically, if you didn't hear that episode, it's when they talk about how this man was disabled for 38 years and he was lying on the side of this pool for a very long time, obviously. And Jesus saw him lying there and asked him, do you want to get well? And he says, sir, I have no one to put me in the pool when the water is stirred up. But while I'm coming, someone goes down ahead of me. Sorry, my mic is like blocking my view. So Jesus says, get up, pick up your mat and walk. And instantly the man got up, picked up his mat and started walking. So this next part, so this miracle just happened. This next part, and this is all why the Pharisees and the religious leaders are wanting him arrested, wanting Jesus arrested, because he performed this miracle and it was on a Sabbath that he originally performed it. So it says, now the day was a Sabbath. And so the Jews said to the man who had been healed, this is the Sabbath. The law prohibits you from picking up your mat. And later on, Jesus kind of shows them that it's kind of double-minded because they can circumcise people on the Sabbath, and that's still considered work, but he can't perform miracles on the Sabbath because that is also considered work. So it's this double-minded mindset. And they're so focused on their laws and their rules and their control that they're missing this miracle that he just performed on this man. The same thing is happening again. This miracle just happened. This guy that was blind can now see again. And instead of seeing this miracle happen, they're still focusing in on it happening on the Sabbath. That Jesus did this on a day that he wasn't supposed to. This is one of the clearest pictures of what happens when people love control more than they love God. Because if your version of faith cannot celebrate mercy, it isn't faith. It is fear dressed up as religion. And the Pharisees are divided at this point. Some are saying he can't be from God. He broke Sabbath. Others are like, how can a sinner do this? And then they ask the man, what do you say about him? And the man says, he is a prophet. So now we have movement. I want you to think about this for a second, because we're not just talking about like this, when we're talking about his sight, when we're talking about him being able to see again, we're not just talking about the physical portion of sight. We're talking about his spiritual sight as well. So originally, he only knew Jesus as this man named Jesus. That's what he said, right? I just want to make sure I'm saying it correctly. The man called Jesus. And now he's starting to put a name kind of to Jesus. He is a prophet. So we have this movement from the man called Jesus to he is a prophet. His sight is not just physical. His understanding is growing. So now let's move on to reflection 3. When God does something in your life, do you let it change what you believe about him, or do you try to fit it into what you've already decided he must be like? So I really want you to think about this before answering it. And I am going to give you guys an example for this one, because you guys know, if you've listened to past episodes, you guys know that we are currently in a season where we've been trying for another child for quite a while now. I mean, it's been a roller coaster of a ride, but we've been trying. Our current child, we only had a 5% chance of actually having him. So I'm so grateful and so thankful for him. But along this process of trying to have a second child, I've realized how easy it is to say, I trust God, but still carry a very specific picture of how I think it's supposed to go. Because he's already performed a miracle for us. He's already given us our first child. So this time around, I haven't been in this mindset where I'm more of, if it doesn't happen, it doesn't happen. I've been more in this mindset where I still want control over it. I still want to make this happen. I'm still tracking all of my cycles. I'm still trying to figure out ovulation stuff. I'm still doing fertility stuff. But I've just realized how easy it is for me to say that I trust him in this process, but I'm still carrying a very specific picture, like I said before, of how I think this whole thing is supposed to go. And when things don't line up with my timeline or that expectation that I have of having a second child, I start to feel this tension in my faith. Like I have to choose whether I'm going to let God meet me in the waiting and let that reshape how I see him, or if I'm going to quietly hold him to the version of him I've already decided I could handle. And I'm slowly learning, and when I say slowly, I mean slowly, but I'm slowly learning that trusting him does not mean understanding the timing. It just means staying open to who he's being in the middle of it all. And it's not easy by any means. Waiting for anybody is not easy. But waiting for anything doesn't mean that nothing is happening. It just means God is still working, just in ways that you just can't see it yet. So let's move on. We're going to read verses 18 through 23 together. And that says, the Jews did not believe this about him, that he was blind and received sight, until they summoned the parents of the one who has received his sight. They asked them, is this your son, the one you say was born blind? How then does he now see? We know this is our son and that he was born blind, his parents answered, but we don't know how he now sees, and we don't know who opened his eyes. Ask him, he's of age, he will speak for himself. His parents said these things because they were afraid of the Jews, since the Jews had already agreed that if anyone confessed him as the Messiah, he would be banned from the synagogue. This is why his parents said, he is of age, ask him. So they call his parents, and his parents are like, yep, that's our son. Yeah, he was born blind. How he sees now? I don't know. Ask him. And the reason for saying to ask him is fear. The text tells us they were afraid of being put out of the synagogue, and they chose safety over honesty. And I want to be gentle here because I get it. Community matters. Belonging matters. People do not want to lose their place. But also this shows how pressure can make people just shrink back from truth. How culture and statuses and the need to fit in can make someone just want to conform to living in someone else's norm. and their reasoning and their truth instead of trying to stand out and finding their own truth. This is tension between fitting in and becoming your own person that in today's world we still live with all the time. So here's your next reflection question. Where do you feel pressure to stay quiet about what God has done for you because you don't want the social consequences? Not even online. This could be in your family, your workplace, your friend group. You can feel pressure everywhere, especially right now. So let's move on. I think this is the second to the last part of this, but let's move on to verses 24 through 34. And it says, I have like Post-its. I don't know if you can see that all over my page. I mean, guess not all over. There's two, but they just keep screwing up where I'm trying to read. So that's why I keep pausing. But it says, so a second time they summoned the man who had been blind and told him, give glory to God. We know that this man is a sinner. He answered, whether or not he's a sinner, I don't know. One thing I do know, I was blind and now I can see. Then they asked him, what did he do to you? How did he open your eyes? I already told you, he said, and you didn't listen. Why do you want to hear it again? You don't want to become his disciples too, do you? They ridiculed him. You are the man's disciple, but we are Moses' disciples. We know that God has spoken to Moses, but this man, we don't know where he's from. This is an amazing thing, the man told them. You don't know where he is from, and yet he opened my eyes. We know that God doesn't listen to sinners, but if anyone is God-fearing and does this will, he listens to him. Throughout history, no one has ever heard of someone opening the eyes of a person born blind. If this man were not from God, he wouldn't be able to do anything. You were born entirely in sin, they replied. And are you trying to teach us? Then they threw him out. All right. This man is honestly kind of iconic here. They bring him back and they basically say, give the credit to God, not to this sinner. And the man responds with one of my favorite lines in scripture. He says, whether he's a sinner, I do not know. One thing I do know is I was blind and now I see. This is such a simple faith statement. He's not pretending to know everything or trying to win a debate at all. He's saying, I can't explain all the theology, but I can't deny what happened. And listen, that is powerful because some of you think you cannot share your faith unless you can answer every question. I can't answer every question, which is why I do so much research before these, and I have notes literally sitting in front of me that I look at constantly throughout this episode, so I can make sure that I do this correctly for you. But this is what the man does. He shares what he knows. And then the more they push him, the bolder he gets, which I love. He basically says, you're obviously not listening. Why do you keep asking me? Do you want to become disciples too? And they get angry and they insult him and say, we are disciples from Moses. And then he hits them with logic. He's like, this is weird. This is a miracle. And you're acting like you can't tell where he's from. And then he says something huge. He says, if this man were not from God, he can do nothing. And they throw him out. So I just want to pause for a second now, because this is what happens sometimes when Jesus changes you. People would rather remove you than reconsider themselves, because your healed life becomes evidence that their system is broken. When I started growing deeper in my own faith, and if you've listened to past episodes, you've probably heard this 50 times, so I apologize, but I lost a lot of friendships. Some people made jokes, others quietly unfollowed me on the socials, and these were people that I once considered to be really close with. And honestly, that's part of why I wanted to start this podcast to begin with. It was for anyone who felt like they don't have a place to process that kind of change, or for anyone who feels alone in their faith or unsure where they belong right now. And I want you to know that you're not wrong for growing. You're not doing something bad by becoming more honest or more rooted or more whole. And you don't have to shrink yourself back just to make people or society feel more comfortable. And sometimes I think about how strange that whole season was. That It felt easier for some people to step away than to just ask me questions or have a conversation with me or just sit with me, just sit with it. And there was never a point where I was trying to push my faith onto anyone or even just to look at people differently because they didn't believe the same thing. I was just living what was changing in me. And sometimes that alone can feel uncomfortable for people, even though nothing is being demanded from them. And when you sit with that long enough, you realize it often says way more about someone else than it does about who you are becoming. So for our next reflection question, I think this is the second to last one. It is. Have you ever been punished socially for telling the truth about what God did in your life? Like not punished by God, but punished by people. Like my example I just told you about, have you ever been excluded or laughed at or dismissed or treated like you're being dramatic or like you're being stupid? And if that is you, I just want to say Jesus sees it and he does not leave you in it, because look what happens next in this passage. We're going to read the final part. We're going to read verses 35 through 41. It says, Jesus heard they had thrown the man out, and when he found him, he asked, "Do you believe in the Son of Man?" "Who is he, sir, that I may believe in him?" he asked. Jesus answered, "You have seen him, in fact. He is the one speaking with you." "I believe, Lord," he said, and he worshiped him. Jesus said, "I came into this world for judgment, in order that those who do not see will see, and those who will." That's hard. Let me start that over. "I came into this world for judgment, in order that those who do not see will see, and those who do see will become blind." Some of the Pharisees who were with him heard these things and asked him, "We aren't blind too, are we?" "If you were blind," Jesus told them, "you wouldn't have sin. But now that you say, 'We see,' your sin remains." So let's take a second here, because Jesus finds this man, and I need you to notice that. He finds him. Not the man finds Jesus. Jesus goes and finds him. Not before the interrogation, not before the pressure, not before things get uncomfortable. After the Pharisees question him, after they doubt him, after they shame him, after they kick him out. This man doesn't go looking for Jesus again. Jesus goes looking for him. And that matters so much, because this man just lost his entire community. He lost his place in the synagogue. He lost safety and belonging. And Jesus doesn't say, "Well, that's what happens when you speak up." He doesn't say you should have handled that differently. He goes and finds him, which tells us something really important about the heart of Jesus. Jesus doesn't just heal and move on. He stays with the people who pay a cost for telling the truth about what he's done in their life. And I think some of us need to hear that, because a lot of times we expect Jesus to meet us at the very beginning, when things are hopeful and when faith feels exciting and we're highlighting every verse and putting cute Bible tabs in our new Bible that we just got. But here, Jesus meets this man after everything falls apart, after the confusion, after the rejection, after the loss. And I just love that the deepest moment of belief in this story doesn't happen at the miracle. It happens here, in the quiet, in the aftermath, in the moment where it would be really easy to feel abandoned. Jesus finds him. And that tells us something about how God works. You don't have to have it all figured out. You don't have to go searching with perfect words. Sometimes faith looks like standing in the wreckage of what just happened and realizing that Jesus is already there. And then he asks, "Do you believe in the Son of Man?" And the man says, "Who is he, sir, that I may believe in him?" And Jesus says, "You have seen him, and it is he who is speaking to you." And the man says, "Lord, I believe," and he worships him. So this man's spiritual sight is now fully open. He's started the chapter blind, physically, but by the end, he sees Jesus clearly. Meanwhile, the Pharisees have functioning eyes and remain blind, and Jesus says that line about judgment and sight and blindness. And it sounds intense, but here's what he is saying in plain language. If you know you need help, you can be healed. If you insist you do not need help, you can stay stuck. And if you're taking notes, that's a good note to put in there. I have it in my Bible, so I'll read it again. If you know you need help, you can be healed. If you insist you do not need help, you will stay stuck. That's it. It's not that God hates people. It's not that Jesus is mean. It's that pride blocks light. Because pride says, I already know, or I'm fine, or I don't need anyone to teach me, or I'm not the problem. And Jesus is like, okay, if you want to admit you're blind, you won't reach for sight. That is why humility is not a personal trait. Humility is a doorway. John 9 is not just a miracle story, it's a revealing story. It reveals how people respond to Jesus. Some people respond with curiosity and honesty. Some people respond with fear and image management. Some respond with control and denial. And one man responds with this simple, steady sentence: I was blind, and now I can see. And that can be your sentence too. You don't have to have it all figured out to be faithful. You just have to be honest. And here's our last reflection question that I just want you to sit with. If Jesus asked you today, do you believe? What would your honest answer be right now? Not the church answer, not the confident answer, the honest one. Some of you feel like you're behind, like you should see more by now. But notice this man's story. He did not start with perfect clarity. He started with mud on his face and a step of obedience. And Jesus met him the entire way. So if your faith feels simple right now, that is not a problem. Simple faith is still faith. So thank you guys so much for hanging out with me today. It really means so much more than you know. If this episode helped you understand John 9 in a way you never have before, would you please just share it with someone who might need that kind of clarity too? If you're new here, welcome. You are already part of this little community now. I'm so excited to have you. You can find all the details for our virtual weekly Bible studies, plus reflection questions, this week's verses, plus encouragement throughout the week. And again, I'm trying to be better with my Instagram, but we're over on Instagram at the Even If Project. That usually, once I get better at it, will be the best place to stay connected and just keep these conversations going. And next time, we're going to be staying right here in John, but the tone is going to shift just a little. After all the tension in chapter 9, after the arguments and the pushback and the man being cast out, Jesus doesn't debate louder. He speaks gentler. He starts talking about shepherds and sheep and voices about who really cares, who stays when things get hard, and how to recognize the difference between a voice that leads you and one that just pressures you. It's less confrontation and more clarity, less proving and more belonging. We'll be diving into John 10, 1 through 21 next week. So bring your coffee, your Bible, and an open heart, and let's walk through it together. I love you all, and I will talk to you soon.